And if this looks like a pulpit, I take a text. And the text is that when the great William Wilberforce went about trying to put onto the statute book that first anti-slavery piece of legislation, it took him over 30 years. It took in this country a little over 30 months. But Wilberforce had the Royal Navy to implement the bill. And we now have to find different ways of implementing this bill. But the thanks start with that, as with Wilberforce, as he then was, but with a group of young evangelicals who said to the Centre for Social Justice, how can you trade under this title when there is slavery in this country? And the group is almost present to person here tonight, and we would not have had a report, a bill, scoping measures, or an act without their initial effort and that Wilberforce determination to see an issue through. I then have a small walk-on part in that in each of our summer recesses in the office in the Commons, we try and do a project. And Tim Whedon, who's now head of the Commissioner's office, and I decided we would try and follow up this report in getting a bill and then an act. But it wasn't till afterwards that I realized that whereas in everything else that I've been involved in, the real difficulty was getting the act onto the statute book. This, for all sorts of good reasons, the way Theresa May picked up this issue and ran with it, that was the easy part. The hard part is how we now get this act implemented. And you've had hints of it this evening. In that, while of course the clause on the supply chains is crucial, but it only went into the Act because it was of minimum demands on firms. It was really important to get it in, to get people into a habit of looking at their supply chains and then to raise that bar, learning from one another how one can successfully try and root out the taint of slavery within one's supply chain. But where the new politics is going to begin, and I'm ever more convinced, the longer the group of us try and work on implementing this act, is going to come from consumers. We are now a nation of shoppers, and we need to take this new leisure activity and turn it to advantage. And how we get in place a form of kite marking so that when people buy, they can say, all right, you've done your best to rid your firm of the taint of slavery. And those that don't, we would then get a pressure from within the retail sector up to board level, is that it's very difficult for us to sell our goods unless we have this form of statement. And it will be like any other, it would be unlike any other kite marking, because up to now, kite marking has been able to guarantee that your farm workers growing those bananas get a proper minimum wage. Because slavery, as we've just heard, is so pervasive, the kite mark has got to be one of intent, the effort to try and root out. And the irony is, the success of it is of companies reporting they found slavery. And as we've just heard, what do you then do but try and get the slave owner to behave in a different fashion and not drive them off to provide somebody else using their group of slaves. So this is, I think, the beginnings of what will be, which those young evangelicals set in mode back in confronting the Centre for Social Justice. How can you bear to trade under this name when there are slaves in this country? and then, as we just heard, about the extent of slavery abroad. But the great unknown in this, if we are going to succeed, and this is the hard part. The easy part was the 30 months getting the bill onto the statute book. The hard part is how do we create for the first time a consumer movement consumed with anger that what they might be sold and the injustice that's done every minute of every day to huge numbers of their fellow human beings, citizens of this earth, who are trapped into slavery. So for those extraordinary beginnings of that evangelical group, mirroring what that other great evangelical did, William Wilberforce, we succeeded more quickly than he did in getting an act, but only to realise that, as Kevin was talking about, the hard work has still got to come. And one side of it is the employers wanting to do the best or fearing not to do the best, but the other is that we begin to have an educated consumer movement which is sustained over people's lifetimes to actually drive out slavery from the supply chain. So for those that are here tonight, I come merely to salute, really, for the work that you've done, that it should continue in this way in the Chelsea Flower Show, that amongst all that beauty, we should be confronted by the cruelty and horror and the awfulness of what is amongst us and which dominates the world. So please do enjoy the rest of this evening, but the main work is to begin, or has begun, but needs to continue afterwards. Thank you very much.